So it's not a legal schooling. I know you're sensitive to people schooling you on the law, but I think I can trump you when it comes to the history of Grenada.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not fair? You don't know the terms.
We love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean.
If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm going to live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. Why then are you contesting the presidency? You've said
Torchlight Independent Media presents Grenada's only source for independent, unbiased, and well-researched broadcast journalism. This is the Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb.
Hello and welcome to the December 19th edition of the Bubb Report. Last week, the ruling People's National Movement Party suffered a major defeat in the Tobago House of Assembly local government elections. The People's Democratic Party, led by trade unionist Watson Duke, becomes only the second party not officially affiliated with the UNC or the PNM to garner a clean sweep in the assembly. The first being author Napoleon Raymond Robinson's National Alliance for Reconstruction, who won 11 of the 12 seats in the Tobago House of Assembly in 1986. Farley Augustine, who predicted some years ago that he will be the chief secretary of the THA, will succeed PNM's Ansel Dennis as the chief secretary and promises sweeping changes to the island's autonomous governance structure.
And therefore, you must conduct yourself in that office that is reflective of an absence of bias when it comes to the people of Tobago, because we will not accept any form of biases from you whatsoever. But I cannot stand here tonight and not end by thanking my family who has been around me, because very often we ignore the fact that success is never an individual story. We stand tall tonight, all 15 of us PDP candidates, because we are able to be hoisted upon someone's shoulder, because someone fought for us. Your PDP candidates, we are no big shots. We ain't come from no privileged family, but we came from humble beginning.
This week in our program, we discuss the significance and implications of the PDP's rise to administrative and executive power in Tobago, and what it may mean for the political landscape of the Twin Island Republic. Also on the report, the government of Grenada, through its Minister of Health Nicholas Steele, removed the 12 midnight curfew that was in place, citing significant changes in the public health conditions on the island. At last week's post-cabinet press briefing, the minister intimated that while one of these restrictions has been lifted, the state of emergency will continue to remain in place.
We do believe that the midnight to 4 a.m. curfew has been having a psychosocial effect on us all. And as a result, the balance must always be sought. And at this point in time, we believe it is possible to safely remove that curfew and hopefully not have to bring it back, but to remove the curfew based on the psychosocial effects of having a curfew, based on the current epidemiological situation in the country at this point in time. Please take that into consideration when also looking at what's happening within the other regional islands, as well as the world at large.
We discussed the epidemiological profile of COVID-19 on the island in the context of the easing of some restrictions and travel quarantine, as well as the easing of curfew hours, in addition to the rising Omicron variant that is concerning public health officials worldwide. We welcome our guests, epidemiologist Gerard Sincere, attorney Richie Maitland, entrepreneur Linton Pear, Nikolai Edwards, political leader of the Progressive Party of Trinidad and Tobago, and Dr. Clarice Modeste Kerwin, Grenada's Minister of Tourism. We thank you for joining us. A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to another edition of the Bubb Report. Now, last week, there was yet another death by suicide in Grenada. This time, the event occurred at the General Hospital in St. George's. The data for suicides on the island has been staggering for 2021, and it hit home in particular for men more than women in this period. Mental health is still very much stigmatized in the Caribbean. As with many mental health statistics, it is hard to know if the data really represent what is happening. They can only tell us about mental health problems that have been reported. Many cases actually go undiagnosed. This may be especially true when it comes to men's mental health. Society's expectations and traditional gender roles play a role in why men are less likely to discuss or seek help for their mental health problems. We know that gender stereotypes about women, the idea that they should behave or look a certain way, for example, can be damaging to them. But it's important to understand that men can be damaged by stereotypes and expectations as well. Men may also be more likely to use potentially harmful coping mechanisms, such as drugs or alcohol, and are less likely to talk to family or friends about their mental health. However, research suggests men will access help that meets their preferences, and it is easy to access meaningful and engaging help. May we as a society therefore encourage our male folk to seek the mental health help they may need, and may we also dismantle the stereotype that doing so somehow makes men weak. And on this note, I wish to welcome my first guest for the Bubb Report this week. That is Mr. Nikolai Edwards. Nikolai, is it Nikolai or Nikolai? I hope I pronounced
Nikolai.
it right.
Nikolai.
It's Nikolai. Thank you.
Yes.
And welcome to the program.
Thank
Now,
you.
Nikolai, last week in the Tobago House of Assembly, there was a clean sweep, really, by the People's Progressive, by the People's Democratic Party.
Democratic Patriots.
The Progressive Democratic Patriots, correct.
Yes.
Now, you said in one of your postings on your political party page that there is space for the results in Tobago at least demonstrate that there is space for more than two parties.
Yes.
That goes beyond the traditional two-party construct in the island. Can you articulate why you express that view? Now, some may say that the Tobago political landscape is totally different from the landscape in Trinidad and Tobago. So your thoughts?
Sure. So the Progressive Democratic Patriots came onto the scene in 2017. And between the time 2017 to present, it would have garnered enough support to move from having no seats in the Tobago House of Assembly to now having 14 out of 15 seats in the Tobago House of Assembly. And of course, prior to the existence of the Progressive Democratic Patriots, you would have had the People's National Movement, which is the longest or the eldest party in Trinidad and Tobago's history, dominating the THE elections, and you would have had other parties who would have been going back and forth with it. But my assessment comes on the basis that a party that is less than 5 years was able to make incursions into the Tobago House of Assembly in the manner in which it did, and that should give hope to other alternative parties. I don't really refer to parties as third parties on a regular, more so alternative parties. And one may say, well, when you look at the THE elections, you had essentially just two parties contesting, PNM and PDP. But in fact, you had other parties. The IDB, I believe it is, or ID, that is a new party, but it was only formed in the last year or so. So it would be less likely to see that kind of an institution coming into the fray at such a short notice and making strong incursions. So again, the fact that a party in 5 years was able to have such a profound impact on the population in Trinidad and Tobago, of course, specifically, should give hope and encouragement to alternative parties that all you have to do is be consistent, you have to have a strong message, and at the end of the day, people have to feel as though you are working on their behalf. And I think that the PDP checked all of those boxes and were able to make the gains that they were able to do. And when we look across the Caribbean, we believe that we exist in a two-party system. But the only reason that continues to promulgate in much the way that it is doing is because we have not seen political parties that have come up as of recent and been as consistent. We can look at the example of the Congress of the People in Trinidad and Tobago, which came onto the scene in 2007, and they were able to amass 144,000 votes, but no seats. They then formed an alliance with the UNC and other parties in 2010 and formed the government. But when talks broke down internally, that party was left on the wayside. Had they stuck it out and been consistent, contested the 2010 general elections, they may have formed the opposition and then in 2015 formed the government. So the key message again, in all of this, you have to be consistent.
But I would press you there, and as a student of history, I do remember that the National Alliance for Reconstruction under the late author Napoleon Raymond Robinson,
yes,
they were also able to, as sort of an alternative party arrangement, also
yes,
have a clean sweep configuration in the Tobago House of Assembly back in 1985 or 86, I believe.
yeah.
So this is not new. So I'm trying to understand then why you think that that would somehow be a novel concept when history tells us otherwise.
Well, that's the thing. I don't consider it to be a novel concept at all. We've had it, but people continue to think that all we have in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago is a two-party system. And it's one of those things where the more you talk about it, the more you feed it, it will grow legs and continue to run. And we have to change the dialogue when it comes to parties and their ability to contest. I can tell you that in Trinidad and Tobago, and it would be the same for many other Caribbean countries, we do not have proper legislation in place or system in place for the registering of political parties and especially support for political parties. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley last year, before the general election, was able to introduce the Representation of the People Amendment Bill. Now, that is supposed to take care of all the inefficiencies when it comes to the politics of things in this country. Registering of a political party, even it speaks to campaign financing and the state playing a role in financing political parties. But it has to be based on a particular formula. Now, the legislation is not the best, but it is definitely a start. And if we were to enact that, I think that parties would not be at such a disadvantageous position that they currently are at right now, because it would call for accountability, transparency, and many other things that we desire when it comes to political parties. So, yeah, we have had situations where parties have cropped up and taken the election and so forth, but it seems as though many parties just don't have the fortitude, the consistency, and even the support, whether it is resources or otherwise, to really go for the long run. And I can tell you that with the Progressive Party, that is something that we have been analyzing and seeking to break, in this case, the glass ceiling, so to say, and really make our mark. We did so in the last election by coming onto the scene. People were familiar with the party and so forth. And it's just now about being consistent with general elections and even local elections here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, reading the tea leaves, Nikolai, with respect to this, I believe this. First of all, I believe this was surprising. This sent shockwaves because the impression was that Tobago is PNM country. Well, we now know that's not the case. But there appears to be an anti-incumbency mode in Trinidad and Tobago, notwithstanding that there was a national elections last year. What are your thoughts with respect to how these results went? Do you think that there was issues with respect to anti-incumbency? Do you think it was also related to the way in which the PNM handled a possible power sharing arrangement with the Watson Duke's camp when they both won six seats equally? And that power sharing arrangement failed. What do you think was responsible for what we witnessed in Tobago?
Well, to be honest, it's a situation of all of the above, because I read this morning an article in which Dr. Rowley, the Prime Minister, was interviewed about the defeat in Tobago. And he said that he was not shocked by the defeat, but what he was a bit more shocked by was the heaviness of that defeat, 14-1. And at one point in time, everyone thought that it was a clean sweep, 15-0. But the fact is, and he himself said it, that people have an issue because the PNM in Tobago especially has reigned for 21 years unbroken. And he said that much with a marriage, people tend to get divorced in some cases because of a marriage just being too long. And that's a fact, I think, here in Trinidad and Tobago, where people simply feel as though we have had this administration governing for as long as they have, and many problems continue to exist and pop up. Now, granted, and I'm always very respectful of my counterparts and so forth, the PNM and every other party that has graced the halls of power, so to say, in Trinidad and Tobago, have contributed to national development. And in one of my statements online that I put up, I said that they have aided in development, but development is not as a result of them, in the sense that this country, all of those persons who've passed through, and parties, entities and stuff, have added and added and added. But we cannot say that the PNM singularly is responsible for where we are at right now. And we saw when, after the elections in January, the PNM did not want to share power at all. And I think that the electorate was looking on at that, and it worked in the PNM's, it worked against the PNM in that case. So this is a lesson to be learned, I think. At the end of the day, people are looking on and they want to see how you govern, how you lead. Tracy Davidson Celestine, and it goes right back, because she was an ambassador representing Trinidad and Tobago in a South American country. She came back in, and it was with this intention.
And she was removed, right? I believe, well, her predecessor was removed, which I think upset a lot of the PNM base.
She played a major role in that effort as the political leader of the Tobago PNM Council, and she was able to unseat the incumbent chief secretary. They placed another person there. She could not fulfill that role because she was not an elected member of the THA, but rather a councillor, so an appointed member, and you have to be an elected member to be chief secretary. So had it not been for that obstacle, she may have well found herself in the position of chief secretary. And I think that even Ansel Dennis, who was the former chief secretary, after that change, he was doing somewhat of a good job. We saw someone who was young, someone who was serious, and so forth. And to unseat that person because of ego and political ambitions continue to send shockwaves across the country. Now, in when we look at Trinidad and Tobago in its entirety, I think people are tired and fed up of the incumbent, the People's National Movement, because we have seen how they have handled the coronavirus, the pandemic here in Trinidad and Tobago. There were good days, and I will not discredit that at all. But then they became too big for their seams, so to say, because you had a situation where businesses were going under, people were losing their jobs, and so forth. And we could have had a clearer path to success and overcoming this pandemic had the government decided on an all hands on deck approach, which they continue to ignore. We have the Roadmap to Recovery Committee that has been set up, but we don't know much of the work that they're doing. And many people continue to feel ignored and disrespected. Young people in particular do not feel that Trinidad and Tobago has the right environment for progress and development, and they do not feel a part and parcel of that process. I can tell you that many, and this may be true for many other Caribbean countries, many young people graduate from university with their qualifications and so forth, and it is extremely difficult to find a job. Now, it's not the government's responsibility to find a job for you, but it is the government's responsibility to facilitate an environment that will allow for things such as entrepreneurship and employment, of course. So these issues are not novel to Trinidad and Tobago, but the fact is that the People's National Movement and even the United National Congress has not put forward a plan that is resonating with the population, and they will feel the brunt of that in the next election, I believe.
Well, you say that, but except I believe the conventional wisdom seemed to suggest that as how Tobago goes, so goes the rest of the country. Now, I do not believe that any of the main political parties in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago would be able to win an election without those Tobago seats, given how divided mainland Trinidad tends to be, especially along the lines of race. Notwithstanding, you do have some marginal constituencies that the PNM was able to keep in the last election. Now, what are your thoughts on the idea that there would be another coalition type arrangement between Watson Duke's Progressive Patriots, as well as Kamala Prasad Bises's UNC?
Yeah.
Yes.
So first of all, let me apologize for that noise just now. I think that it sends a message. It sends a message that that your vote matters. I think first and foremost, because we saw where persons won by 2 and 3 votes in the THA elections. Of course, Tobago being a small island, and the margins would not be expected to be that huge in any event. But nonetheless, it shows that your vote matters, because people may have been tempted in the past to vote for an alternative, but they felt as though if they voted that way, it would have been a wasted vote. And that is a narrative, a very dangerous narrative that has been perpetrated by the People's National Movement, the United National Congress, and others, that if you vote otherwise, then you will be wasting your vote, because there is no way, no chance that any other party would be able to break the barrier and get in. But I think that this now demonstrates that there is hope for another political entity in this country. And we just have to look at history again, where you saw the NAR, you saw the COP and so forth, picking up a lot of groundswell. From this point onward, all eyes are going to be on the Tobago House of Assembly. Now, we have a local government election expected to take place next year, and then a general election in 2025. So if the PDP is able to manage Tobago's affairs well enough, I think that people may feel then that they can vote away from PNM and UNC in Trinidad and be able to get similar results. Now, if the PDP does not perform well, that will have repercussions, I think, on the national politics as well. So they are now going to be, in a sense, the standard bearers for change, and all eyes will continue to be on them. But I do have hope that people's eyes, whether it's because of the pandemic or otherwise, people's eyes are finally open, and they are now taking issue with the style of governance and even the approach of the Prime Minister, because people continue to say that he has a very bullying and demeaning presence, and his statements are not necessarily in keeping with what we want in Trinidad and Tobago. But nonetheless, I think that all the ducks are lining up, and we will see change in Trinidad and Tobago in a very meaningful way.
But I would push back there. I mean, the prime
Sure.
minister, Dr. Rowley, he has been called by the predecessor of the PNM, the late great Patrick Manning,
Manning.
as a raging bull. I mean, he was a backbencher in the Trinidad Parliament. I mean, Calypsonian Tigress sang a calypso a couple of years ago, referencing Dr. Rowley as a wajang.
Hmm.
But people still voted for him. Is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
But there were only two options at the end of the day,
Uh-huh.
and two
Okay.
options in terms of the political leadership of the PNM, and then two options in terms of the national elections, UNC versus PNM. Because you have to remember that after Dr. Rowley unseated Patrick Manning, and the fact is that Patrick Manning had lost credibility with a large segment of the population because of Calder Hard, because of mismanagement, because of the megalomania kind of presence or character that he was turning into. So therefore, they wanted a shift. And the only alternative at that point was Dr. Rowley, who offered himself. So he got in. And remember that he was the opposition leader for a number of years. So we had the United National Congress in office. And we can go on and on about the mismanagement and corruption that took place there. So then people had only the options of the United National Congress or the PNM, and they chose the PNM because they voted the UNC out of office. So we have to stay true to the facts of history that dictate that this was inevitable. Now we are in a different time. The fact is that in 2015, our last general election, the United National Congress did not present itself as a proper alternative. And even in opposition right now, they are not presenting themselves as a formidable opposition. So I think it opens up room for alternative parties to enter the fray and make a real difference. And it may require political parties coming together, something that has proven very difficult in the past. And I can tell you this from first-hand experience. But this is what we have to do if we want to save Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, you spoke about coming together. Was that on your cards for your political party?
Yes, so we had had many discussions with political leaders across Trinidad and Tobago. But I can tell you this without contradiction, that many of these political leaders have their ego showing. And it had been one of those demotivating moments for me in my very short political career thus far, when I have seen that some of these other elder political leaders were not taking heed to the warnings and the signs that we had to work together. It was not about which party should take the lead and who should become the leader and so forth. We should have been able to first and foremost agree on a pathway forward in terms of what are our policies, what are our positions, and so forth. And that was not something that was properly dealt with. And I think it was the urgency of the election that just simply allowed people to talk. Now that we do not have an election imminent upon us, I think that people are not seeing the need to have conversations. And that, again, is telling of how the politics has somewhat descended in Trinidad and Tobago. But nonetheless, I, as political leader of the Progressive Party and the party as a whole, we are very much interested in working with any party, any individual who has the best interests of Trinidad and Tobago at heart, whether they come from our own political party or another. And I think this is what the politics requires now. Maybe it is because I'm younger and I have a different outlook that some of those who've gone before me, but I think this is the message that is coming from the ground, where we need to see how we can work together outside of government in order to put you into government, because we don't have the benefit of having councillors or MPs to be able to show that we have a track record. What we can show is our leadership style, our positions in terms of policies and so forth, and how we treat with the issues that we can treat with outside of government. So we continue to look on, but we're working behind the scenes, having conversations and working toward forming the next government, whether it is singularly or as a group. that is always the intention of a political entity, whether you start today or yesterday or 10 years ago. It is always to form government, and we are staying true to that. We want to form government, but for the purpose of assisting people where and when we can.
Now, you, I believe in the last election, you contested the Tobago East constituency. Is that
San Fernando
correct?
West.
I'm sorry, San Fernando West. I do apologize.
No
Not
problem.
Tobago East. San Fernando West, which is the seats occupied by, I believe, the Attorney General. That's
Yes,
that's Faris Alwari. Yes.
Correct.
For some reason, I thought you contested the Tobago West. I'm sorry.
No.
I keep saying Tobago. San Fernando East, which was the former seat of the late Patrick Manning. Now, these, to me, like these constituencies tend to be garrison constituencies in that way. They're very safe seats, for example, for the incumbent. I know that San Fernando it's a PNM. They say it's PNM country. Nobody can go there. The same with Superior and those places. Now, how are you going to really contest elections in the context of that type of garrison type politics that exists in Trinidad and Tobago? Well, more so Trinidad, not necessarily Tobago.
Sure. So I want to make a point at first. A lot of times people ask me, so why did you contest San Fernando West? You should have contested another seat and so forth. But I stay true to the essence of representation and what it should be like. You should be representing your people. And I am from San Fernando West. So why would I pick up myself and go and run in another seat because it may be easier? The goal is not to simply just get in. It is also to represent my people, my community, where I understand the issues firsthand. And therefore it has a personal place in my heart to fix the issues of the people around me in my community or neighborhood. So people said that, it would be a tough fight and all of that, but I was in it for the long haul. So contesting San Fernando West, what I have realized, many people were having a conversation with me and saying that they were willing to support me, but they said next election. And I found that to be extremely weird. But in digging deep to understand what they meant, they felt that the UNC had a chance of forming the government. And should they have voted for someone outside of the PNM incumbent in that constituency, it could have been whomsoever, that they felt as though they would have been losing the country to the United National Congress. And so they decided to place their vote where they felt there was the greatest chance of protecting their constituency and protecting the country from the United National Congress. I understand the thinking behind it, but of course I don't agree with it. What I think is required to break down these political entities and the stronghold that they have on them is consistency. Of course, resources is a big part of it, and you need resources in order to make inclusions, to get people to come out and inform them of different things, down to even video productions and so forth. These things cost money. And so there were lessons to be learned. And what we have done now is planted the seeds of change in Trinidad and Tobago by providing an alternative. I never expected that the Progressive Party would have won the election outright. What I had hoped for is that we would have been able to get at least one seat so that we could have used that seat to show what representation can look like. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But nonetheless, we have planted the seeds, and I think from that election moving forward, we are going to see the Progressive Party grow. It will be on the minds of more people. And also, you have to remember that each election, there is a new generation of voters coming forward. And so the younger generations, I think, are rejecting the idea that our Prime Minister and our government, but specifically our Prime Minister, has to be a 70-something plus year old person. All right. We want to see, just as how we've seen around the world, younger blood come into the fray. And the fact is, and not to be disrespectful to anyone, but the fact is that the decisions that our Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, and his government is making now he may not live to see many of those things come to pass in the next 25 years or so. So therefore, you would want younger blood who can understand trends, who can understand the direction of the world and the country, and will be around to live some of those changes, because it is so important that they do it for their peers, but also the generation that comes up. So I do think that we are going to see change. I think that PNM country and things of that nature, that is going to be something kept in the past. Moving forward, Trinidad and Tobago should be up for grabs for whichever party has the best interests of the country at heart. And I believe those days are coming.
Nikolai, thank you so much. But we have a comment here from Bob Marisha, who is saying, Nikolai, did you know that there was a historical connection between Grenada, Tobago, and Trinidad? Grenada opted out in 1862. The people of Tobago have a love and reverence for the people of Grenada, and that feeling is mutual.
Yes. And I know that Patrick Manning, when he was Prime Minister, he ensured that the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and Grenada was a strong one. I remember Trinidad and Tobago assisting in times of disaster and so forth, the people of Grenada. And of course, we are separated by a body of water, but nonetheless, when you think about the culture, and I will tell you, recently I hosted someone from Grenada who came to Trinidad, and we spent a couple of days, and I got to understand a bit more of the culture in Grenada and so forth. And I think it is very important as Caribbean countries to maintain good relationships. I was thinking up to this morning about how CARICOM can more or less reinvent itself to present to the people of the Caribbean that it is an entity worthy of your attention, time, and effort. Once we are able to do away with the differences among these countries, I think the Caribbean can be a formidable force. We already have so many, so many things that bind us together that we can work toward. And I remember, of course, I'm seeing question there in terms of 1 from 10 is no. That was from Dr. Eric Williams when we had the West Indian Federation, and that led to the collapse of the West Indian Federation thereafter, leading to CARICOM. I think the thinking has to be different right now. Of course, 1 from 10 is 9. But it means that there are 9 opportunities to try and get that one back into the fray. So our thinking in 2021 and beyond has to be different. And we have to see Caribbean countries as our brothers and sisters. I know there is even tensions between Guyanese and Trinidadians. And of course, I think the Guyanese people are a bit cautious about Trinidad and Tobago's involvement in their newfound fossil fuels and
oil
so
and gas, yeah.
Yeah, so, but I really hope that at least the people of Ghana give the people of Trinidad and Tobago an opportunity to show that we are not here to come and take your resources and so forth, but because we have years of experience in this field, that would be seen as worthy enough to assist. Allyship is important. We're not here to steal the show. And of course, I'm not talking for Trinidad and Tobago. I'm not in that position. I'm not the Prime Minister. But as a citizen, I think it is my duty to represent this country well and to see that for all that we have done in the past, allow us an opportunity to correct that in the future moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And we have some other comments, and then I'll give you a chance to wrap up with some closing thoughts. Lorna Charles is saying, that's a powerful point, Nicola. Young people want people who they can relate to and who understand them and who are forward thinking. It's interesting. We are also having a debate about age in Grenada. The Prime Minister of Grenada is also in his 70s. So I'm sure people would be very interested in what you just said there about age as a thesis.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well. Yes, Lydia James saying, the political climate in Trinidad is the same as Grenada. Whoa. My good friend and esteemed scientist of Tobagonian extraction at Cornell University, Philson Warner, would agree with me. Let's see, we have another comment here. I think it's saying we have that bond with the people of Tobago. My family is based there. And we have another comment, Louise, saying, excellent move. It is time that these dinosaurs and bullies be laid to rest. Grenada, look, learn, listen, and act. Time to move forward, not backward. We are the next to make this all-important change. The time has come. Young people, educate your mind for the job ahead. It's not an easy road. And folks, remember, please, to share this live, share this conversation. that we're having here. But Mr. Edwards, I will give you a chance for some closing comments. Of course, the elections, national elections in Trinidad are not constitutionally due until 2025, I believe, because you just had an election last year. I believe Dr. Rowley called that election before that mood of anti-incumbency really took hold in the Twin Island Republic. Now, moving forward, let's get some closing thoughts from you about what the political landscape would look like. What do you hope to contribute to that political landscape moving forward into the next elections?
So I do think moving forward, young people will be the determinants of our country's future. It's inevitable because as you see more young people coming up, the generations are different in terms of their use of technology, in terms of their awareness, in terms of what matters to them. Because a young person today is very much concerned whether or not he articulates it or she presents it in that fashion, but very much concerned about things such as human rights, climate change, the environment, and so forth. And I think that for as long as politicians of today continue to leave those issues out of their plans and proposals, we're not going to see them getting the kind of support. The time for bacchanal and bob oil and all of these things are gone. It should not be, as a politician, your duty to demean your opponent. It rather should be your opportunity to show why you are more fit for the job without being disrespectful to the other opponent. And I think that those are the things we need to see in our elections. What I would say as well, I think that there needs to be a wave of change blowing across the Caribbean, because we've had it before when we had the independence wave coming across the Caribbean. And we had many of those leaders who may have been schoolmates and interacted with one another in some form or fashion. So you saw a crop of leaders coming and gracing the Caribbean and leading it forward. But now the time has changed for that. And I think that this is where we need to work with one another. Political parties from across the Caribbean need to work together. And I had the opportunity in Guyana. I was invited at the launch of a new political party in Guyana a while back. And I was invited in my capacity as political leader of the Progressive Party. So that shows that there is a coming together in some way, form, or fashion. So I think now we need to extend our tentacles to other Caribbean countries and support one another getting into office so that change can come almost at once. And I think that the Caribbean, when that sun sets on the Caribbean and rises, it would be a change that we can all agree upon and move this country, this Caribbean forward. So I'm very hopeful in Trinidad and Tobago that better days are coming, but it's not going to be an easy task. People have to be willing to step up and support more than just words on Facebook and a comment here and a like. You have to be willing to come out, put your money where your mouth is, open up opportunities for people to be heard, and go the distance. Once that happens, there will be nothing stopping this movement from coming to the fore.
Mr. Edwards, thank you so much. It's certainly a pleasure having you on the program. We will be certainly inviting you back closer to the elections, or even, perhaps Dr. Rowley might decide that he wants to call an early election. Who knows what but it's certainly a pleasure having you here, sir, and thank you for being on the Bubb Report.
It was indeed a pleasure. Thank you so much. And just to your viewers, you can feel free to check out my pages on social media, Nikolai Jean-Paul Edwards. You can check it out on Facebook, and you'll get a lot of my commentary and even some videos that you might be interested in. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
I'm sure the Grenadian public would be very interested in your commentary, specifically on the thesis of youth and aging politicians in the region, because that is a debate that we're also having in Grenada very intensely at this moment.
And I'm looking forward to an opportunity somehow or the other to reach Grenada. I've gone to so many other Caribbean countries, but Grenada, it's high on my list, but I haven't arrived there as yet. So hopefully after this, some opportunities may arise.
Absolutely, and we will be in touch in that score. All right, Nikolai, thank you again. This is Mr. Nikolai Edwards, the leader of the Progressive Party of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And as we take the break, we will play a retrospective clip from the former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the late author Napoleon Raymond Robinson, as we reminisce and reflect on what occurred in the Tobago House of Assembly last week. He was also a change candidate of his time. So we want to go down a memory lane a bit, and we will come back with our panel segment for the week.
This is the Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb.
notion of a West Indian Federation. But even after the Federation collapsed, he continued to vigorously pursue the ideal of regional cooperation.
So what we're looking to ultimately is the Caribbean region being a region of production in relation to the outside world, whether it be North America, Europe, or southern using southern in the ideological sense, countries of the south, so to speak, because we are also developing, creating relations with India. We will seek to develop with Africa, with Latin America. There are powerful offenders who cannot be brought to justice in their own countries because they can escape the judicial system, the police or the courts, as the case may be. Secondly, there may be offenses committed in other countries, but which injure countries in which the offenses have not been committed, or the offender may commit the offense in one country and escape to another. So that there needs to be international cooperation in order to ensure that offenders are brought to justice. And it's not only in a matter of illicit trafficking in drugs. There are a number of other areas where that kind of action is necessary.
And welcome back, folks. We certainly welcome your comments. Please add some comments to the conversation that I had earlier with Mr. Nikolai Edwards. I'm sure that a number of the youth activists in Grenada would be very interested to hear what the gentleman had to say. But at this time, I wish to welcome our panel for the week, Mr. Richie Maitland, who is a constitutional attorney. He's also a past student of the Presentation College. I thought I would put that dig in there, Richie, as well as Mr. Jared Sincere. Jared, you need to turn your camera on. Epidemiologist, also a past student of the PBC. Again, enough PBC jokes for the day, gentlemen. As well as Dr. Clarice Modeste Cohen. Dr. Modeste, you might have to adjust the angle of your computer screen so that we can see your face there. Very well, thank you. She is the Minister of Tourism of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, and also the Member of Parliament for the constituency of St. Mark, as well as Mr. Linton Pear. Mr. Linton Pear, you are an entrepreneur, and I believe you also run the Mongazo recreational facility in St. David. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the report. Now, Richie, I want to start with you. Off topic a bit. I want you to quickly react to the previous conversation that we had here with Mr. Edwards. What are some things that stood out with you?
Well, the parallels. I think there are extremely close parallels in those situations where in both countries, in both Tobago and Grenada, we have a situation where we have a relatively aged prime minister and a potential competitor who's younger, and the competitor's age has become part of the public narrative somehow. So it's similar in that regard, as to whether or not the younger or the older have the better capacity to run the island, whether one has enough experience or whether one is in touch enough. So that sort of thing, the parallels were really, really, close to me. So that struck me significantly.
All right, very well. Now I would segue into inviting the minister here on the platform. Dr. Modeste, welcome to the Bubb Report. You need to unmute the mic there. And thank you. Yes, you are unmuted. Now, thank you for agreeing to appear on the program today. As for full disclosure, we did invite the Minister of Health because we felt that the Minister of Health should have been here as well to add some context. The Minister of Health did not respond to my messages. So, Minister, thank you for agreeing. Now, Minister, we will get into a conversation about what is called safe zones, public health safe zones in Grenada, especially when cruise ships are in port. How has that been working out in terms of its implementation? What are some kinks that still need to be resolved?
Okay, thank you for allowing me to be on this show, and good morning to you and the other participants. Good morning to Grenada. Yes, the safe zones, or sometimes it's called the bubble. These are areas that have been vetted by, or routes that have been vetted by the Grenada Tourism Authority in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. And they look for certain things. There's a criteria in terms of having the wherewithal to implement the protocols. So the hand sanitizing, the washing, those sort of things that we're used to. Having persons who can oversee that these things are being done. And of course, having an experience that people can still enjoy in spite of the restrictions, because with all of these things that people are not used to, one has to be more innovative in terms of entertaining your guests and balancing between them and having the restrictions. So we have a number, maybe about 14 of these sites that have been certified thus far. All of the, as far as I know, all of the attraction site owners have been engaged and have been encouraged to put things in place. We've had a number of sessions where we've done training, refresher rather, because since COVID started, we have had a series of training where we have invited persons who have some interest in the industry to participate. But you know, old habits die hard, and so we have to keep refreshing. And also, the COVID situation is extremely fluid, and we have to keep reminding persons, or maybe adding a little touch here and there. So these are the zones, and these were set up in collaboration with the cruise ships and the tour operators in Grenada. And of course, the Ministry of Health's input is always sought. And there were sessions between the main tour operators, cruise, health, and tourism, of course, ministry and tourism authority, to look at the protocols on the cruise ship, that we needed to be satisfied that they had a very appropriate, I was going to think stringent, but stringent doesn't necessarily mean appropriate, but an appropriate protocol for persons to follow. And that on our end, we had certain things to accomplish as well, to keep visitors safe and to keep Grenadians safe. So that was the general gist of it.
Okay, Jared, bubbles. I think this appears to be a practice, a public health practice globally. Now, what is it? What is the point of having these bubbles? If you're saying to people, for example, that you should be wearing your masks, you should be socially distancing, you should be practicing all of those things, why then the need to have that additional measure that says if you're not vaccinated, you cannot frequent certain locations, like in the case of Grenada, especially when cruise ships are in port?
Good morning, Kellen, and good morning to the other panelists. And once again, thank you for having me on your show.
Yes.
From a public health perspective, Kellen, having a bubble just ensures that we do not leave any opportunity for the virus to spread. And very often, especially in our case and in the Caribbean, where we depend heavily on tourism, creating those bubbles is essential for getting the tourism industry back up and running. Possibly in the future, as we continue to increase our vaccine uptake and our approach towards adhering to the protocols, then we can create more bubbles and relax those restrictions a bit. But we expect that just after having a first wave of the COVID-19 within our population, we do expect, and if you look at other countries, they are in the Caribbean, they are doing similar, having similar approaches towards that as well. So the main reason is to try to ensure that we do not have an outbreak just after the first wave.
Except outbreaks are still possible with those who are fully vaccinated. We know of full breakthrough infections.
Yes,
yeah?
we are aware that we have breakthrough infections, but the science shows that breakthrough infections are less likely to spread the virus, so they're less infectious. And so whilst they occur, in addition to being less infectious, the severity of illness is minimized as well. And so it really adds that it gives an added protection. So whilst we understand the fact that we do have breakthrough infections, it is a matter of controlling and limiting the illnesses that that can be experienced if you get infected. So I would say that being vaccinated gives you an added protection, but that doesn't negate the fact that we should be adhering to the protocol, social distancing, sanitizing our hands regularly, and wearing your mask properly. These are the baseline strategies that we must employ as a nation if we are to continuously fight against the COVID-19 to prevent future outbreaks.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Madas, I'm going to bring you back here now. One of the requirements for service providers and stakeholders to function is the requirement of ensuring that people are fully vaccinated at those sites that tourists frequent. What does the data look like now with respect to getting everyone on board? Do we still have holdouts with respect to people who operate, for example, at the vendors market in Grand Dance and at other tourism-heavy sites on the island?
Okay, I cannot give you exact figures at this time because the numbers are changing. When we started, there was quite a bit of pushback, and I just want to mention here, take a little time to mention the importance of education, the importance of engagement and dialogue in these very trying times, and perhaps we could have had more dialogue initially. I want to say that because subsequently we did pick up on that. I tried to be present as far as it was possible to answer questions, to provide suggestions, and to listen, more importantly, to listen to recommendations. However, there were some things, and you have heard Mr. Sincere, he has said it, that are standard in other countries that are proven scientifically to be effective, and therefore we have to go by that. And besides, we also have a sort of compact to keep, which we insisted to the cruise ships. Look, you have to, persons who set foot on our soil have to be fully vaccinated, because as it was said, it is proven to restrict the infection rate, the spread of the virus, and also the disease burden on countries. And we had a lot of back and forth and a lot of arguments, but eventually they agreed. And then they asked for reciprocity. What are you going to do in return? Where are you going to take us? Are they going to be fully vaccinated? And so we agreed in that regard. And so we started having the conversation. When we started, there was a lot of pushback, but gradually as people understood a little bit more of the disease, one never knows too much or enough about the disease. It's an ongoing thing. And the fact that if we wanted cruise ships to come back, and it's happening island-wide, people have choices. Instead of a cruise ship staying 1 day in one island, they can stay 2 days, they can spend a night, and they don't have to come here. We want them. They make an important contribution to our economy and to individual revenues and their livelihoods. And so we had to make that compromise. And the majority of vendors when last I heard it was about 80%. The majority of vendors at the market, the vendors market in Grand Anse, are fully vaccinated. And we also did have the issue with the mall, the Bruce Street Mall, that one section where not where the regular business takes place. That section where duty-free, like Colombian Emeralds and those places are. We couldn't open initially because everybody, again, wasn't vaccinated. And based on the agreement we had, we couldn't open. And people said, well, couldn't just open and let let the visitors decide. We couldn't do that because we had an agreement with the cruise lines. That is what we were going to do. And again, I am told that if not all, almost all of the vendors there are fully vaccinated. And I'm told that what they're going to do is have a section in the day, like morning from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock, when the visitors can come purchase their whatever, their craft, their drink, whatever. And then they can return to the cruise ship if that's all they want, because that is what we want them to do, to come on island and purchase and leave some money behind. And then from midday onwards, 12, 1 o'clock, then it's fully open again to the public. That's on cruise ship days. On the no cruise ship days, no call days, then the place operates as per normal. During the cruise ship time, though, when the 8 to 12 that I think the company, the management has agreed upon, there are some food areas, food courts that locals can have access to from another entrance. So it's just really some of the shops that are on both sides. And I understand it's an inconvenience, but if we want the calls to continue, that is where it is at this time.
Okay, and I'm going to bring in Richie here. Richie, we'll be taking this again. This is an all angles look at this issue. And Richie, I'm bringing you here as a constitutional attorney on the question of the. Now, first of all, there has been lots of resistance to vaccination. A number of organizations, a number of activists in Grenada expressed concern about issues with respect to mandatory vaccinations, bubbles, and things like that. However, none of them took it to the court to get a legal opinion. So it's interesting that no one took it that far. So I want to get your take on sort of the constitutionality of these bubbles that we have. What does the Constitution say about that in the context of public health? You need to unmute there, Mr. Maitland. There you are. Go ahead.
Right. So the Constitution doesn't speak specifically about the issue. And while it prohibits discrimination on the basis of origin, I think as a people, we also have to be practical. You know, the country is suffering. We're seeing more breakings. We're seeing more robberies. We're seeing people suffering. And that is how a lot of people get their bread and butter. So I am one of the attorneys who, you know, I've not looked too deep into that question, because honestly speaking, I'm glad that we're getting the cruise ships back. In as much as cruise ship tourism is perhaps the form of tourism which brings in the least amount of foreign exchange in that country, but I'm still happy because people are able to feed their children, buy school bags, do different things. So as far as the constitutionality of it goes, there really is no clear answer, specifically because it hasn't been litigated in courts. Ultimately speaking, it would be a balancing act. The courts, what the Constitution says essentially is that one may not pass any law which in and of itself or in its effect will have a discriminatory effect on anyone. I'm not quite sure if this is a law or this is just something that the government is, you know, sort of encouraging people to do. If it were a law, then certainly it could be challenged. But there are always restrictions to laws. So the right to freedom of discrimination can be restricted on the basis of public health, for instance. And the science is clear, as the two previous speakers would have indicated, that vaccination does make a difference in transmission, in how sick you get, in whether you end up in hospital or not. And you know the state of our hospital here and the burden that one COVID patient might have on that hospital. So while the answer isn't certain, while it isn't black and white per se, I think there's a lot that can be presented to a court that would allow a court to say, okay, we will justify the discrimination in this particular instance, given the circumstances, which of course would include the economics of what is happening.
And I'm going to shift the conversation a bit here. Last week, the Minister of Health, who sometimes tend to get a lot of fire from the population because of his cadence and the way that he speaks to people, at least the perception that he talks down to people, made an announcement about the relaxing of the curfew hours. And I'm going to bring in Mr. Linton Pay. Mr. Pay, I'm sure that that announcement greeted you with much happiness.
Yes, it did actually. Was on the announcement of that, I mean, promoters like myself and people was into the entertainment part of it. I think that was good news for us. However, one still need to be mindful of the whole COVID, and it is still out there, regardless of the fact that we are open, but we still have to be mindful. And I think already it's getting out of hand. So, as from my side of it, I try my best to keep it down and the down low as is, because we don't want to go further back into a lockdown, which could be more problems anyway. So I think, and I'm urging the public to actually remember the protocol, and be mindful that not because let's say the curfew is out, that we should be careless,
Now, how did that curfew affect business at your space up there in St. David?
Well, actually, I got a great hit on it, because I was shut down completely for months in terms of operation to the public. However, on the flip side of it, I was doing a lot of preparations and so forth when that really do subside, So for me, was to go back more to the drawing board and say, listen, this is what we got to live with for a while. So, or what are you going to do different? Or are you going to change around in terms of operation? Well, the biggest decision was to make now is whether or not you're going fully vaccinated or not to come back. And I mean, we began a lot of blows with that. But
when you say you've been getting a lot of blows, explain.
Well, all right, well, my place is a place people just come to relax and stuff, and like what you will be getting is like, oh, well, we can't come because we're not fully vaccinated and you are pushing fully vax, etc. So what you would find is the numbers in terms of turnout has significantly declined. But I'm more or less trying to stick with that. So that
right. Do you have a vaccination policy for your staff in place?
Yes, I do.
And,
my staff
and
did
they have to be fully vaccinated?
Yeah, my staff, yes.
And patrons?
Patrons.
Patrons as well. Okay, yeah. Okay. All right, so we are going into the holiday season. It's Sorrel, Ham, and Jesus Christ season. And how are you faring there in terms of uptick in? Has there been an uptick in customers frequenting your location?
Yes, actually there is. I mean, there is a peak interest because everybody coming to see that new sport in Mongazo, and there's a peak in interest. But like I said, in between that is the big question: are you vaxxed or not? But I think we're reaching out to a new set of let's say clientele. It's reaching for that, and we getting peak interest to the place. So the season is not looking too bad.
All right, very well. Mr. Sensei, I want to bring you back here. Now, you heard the announcement last week from the public health authorities in Grenada with respect to relaxing the curfew. Is that a good idea, given that we have this new variant looming? Of course, they still have the emergency powers in place that they need to go to ensure that we have proper regulation there. But was that a good idea, and was that timely enough?
Well, Kellon, this is an interesting question, because I would say it's a good idea if we follow the protocol strictly, but it's not a good idea if we're not following the protocol. So that is largely dependent on the behavior of the population. Eventually, we would have had to open the country and remove the curfew. The big question is, are we responsible enough to be following the protocols? Last night I drove through Grenville. I live on that side of the island, and it's quite interesting that I didn't see anyone wearing a mask. And there were many crowds all over the places. People were talking and enjoying themselves, and I didn't see anyone. Absolutely no one was wearing a mask. So that is a cause for concern. I believe the government would have had to release or remove the curfew eventually, whether it's this month or January. But I don't believe that we fully understand. We have a very short memory, and we just came through one of our worst experiences as a population with the first wave causing 200 deaths. And as I always say, we have a very small population. Each Grenadian would have known someone who would have died. And the impact that it had on us was great, but we seem to have forgotten that. And individuals are behaving as if it's, wow, the curfew has removed, so let us let loose. Yes, we can go
as if it's August 2021.
Yeah, we can go enjoy
Which was
ourselves.
just a couple months ago.
Exactly. So that is my biggest concern. The curfew would eventually have to be removed. The timing, I would say, I understand the fact that the population has been locked down, and so the perspective was that we need to get a little bit of freedom. But with freedom, I would say, comes responsibility, and especially within a pandemic that has had that impact on our population. But we start to say we have a very short memory of it, and we are playing with fire if we do not adhere to the protocols. The virus is still here. I'm not even talking about Omicron, the new variant. The virus is still here, circulating on very small rates, at very low rates within the population, and so we're not feeling that impact. But if we continue to disregard and not take up our responsibility, the rural areas on island are the areas that have the lowest uptake of vaccines. So these are the areas that potentially are at risk for an outbreak the second time around. And if we do not continue to strengthen the message that it's not over, we have to fight this together. Each individual must take that responsibility to always adhere to the protocols of social distancing, wearing a mask properly, and sanitizing your hands regularly. There is a potential there, Kelon. The Christmas season is a season where we celebrate a lot, we socialize a lot, we visit each other. There's a lot of gatherings, and so that scenario alone, that it's ideal for another outbreak. And so we have to be mindful of that. And that's my biggest concern. I'm not concerned so much about the releasing of the curfew. It's the fact is we have not learned from the first experience, and we seem to take it very lightly. We could have another outbreak, and this time it can be more into the rural areas, because these are the areas that have the lowest uptake of vaccines.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. A cautionary tale there. Dr. Modest, now you've listened to the epidemiologist. You're also a medical professional, and so what are you able to adjust the camera, Minister? We can barely see. There you go. Yeah. All right, and you need to just unmute the mic as well, please. Yeah. So
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Again, so we have a couple dynamics at play now. The curfew has been lifted. That's the 12 midnight to 4 a.m. curfew, as well as quarantine restrictions at the main ports of entry if you are fully vaccinated. Of course, the caveat is if you get tested positive during that window of period after you get tested in the country, you will be required, after you get tested at the port of entry, you will be required to self-isolate during that period. I want you to talk about the benefits and the risks, really, of your government's decision to have those two things at play.
Thank you, Kellan. And I must commend, in matters like this, I defer to the epidemiologists. So Mr. Sincere has my full support and full, respect for that, for his very sober, very, very sober analysis and assessment of the situation. However, we in government, you have another side to see. I mean, for health and safety, I might have said, look, let's keep this 6 o'clock. But it's not practical. It's not practical for businesses. We had situations where businesses would be closing at 3 o'clock instead of 4 because people had to pack up, they had to get to their homes in a certain time, and especially if they're taking buses, which doesn't guarantee you a time of departure and arrival, then you have problems. So I agree with his assessment. The wearing of the mask, we have become very negligent as a country with that, and it would have felt more comfortable if we had more persons vaccinated, because a lot of countries, even when we see that the rate of infection is high, they base their decisions to open up more on the vaccination rate, the number, the levels, and they find that there is less infection, maybe not even less infection, but less illness, then less disease burden and so on the population. So persons may have it milder, etc., etc. We do not have that kind of comfort. Our numbers may have grown. I remember one time we were stuck in 21, like we were in the doldrums, not moving anywhere. 21,000. Now we're stuck we were stuck in 33 for a long time. And I mean, the increases that we see in other countries, it's a far cry from what we have here. But we also had to take into consideration, of course, the business side of it, the economic health of the individuals in the country, as well as the economic health of the country. But we also had to take into consideration the psyche, the psychological, emotional things that were going on with people. And we did see a couple suicides. And somebody mentioned it, we've seen a few sociological issues of concern. And even the school children, and it's proven in some areas that in some countries that because of the lockdown and so on, some children have fallen way back in their studies and so on. And so based on discussions from health and so, we came to that decision. Let us open up for a while, because while we do have the few cases, we are in a better place than we were months ago, like the July, August, September kind of scenario that we had, which was extremely troubling. The amount of deaths we had, just about 200. I don't know if it went a little bit over that, but that is pretty much where it stopped. But it hurt us badly because our population is small and everybody knows everybody. However, the deaths deaths due to COVID had either stopped completely or they were very infrequent. And the number of our cases are small. So all of these things were taken into consideration. And we thought, we have a chance now to do it. Let's give it a try. We know we can always go back to where we were. We do not want to go back there. We know another variant is on the horizon. But would it be better to wait until the variant come and say, oh my gosh, we should have done it 2 months ago? No, we can't do it for the next 2-3 months. So it is a fine balancing act, a very difficult one. But I still think we took the right decision at the time. But it is a responsibility of our citizenry to make the right decisions, to follow the protocols or guidelines. And let's see what the wearing of the mask, the hand sanitizing, the distancing can do for us. And I believe it can work, but we need a lot of input from everybody on board.
Mm-hmm. Now, Richie, let me bring you back here as the attorney. What occurred to a number of people who reached out to us last week after the minister's announcement was the notion of the state of emergency. The thesis was that the question was, okay, well, the state of emergency is still in place even after the curfew was lifted. Why is that so? Can the state of emergency still be in place even after a curfew has been lifted?
Yes, because a curfew is only one of the measures that may be taken once a state of emergency in fact exists. And the benefit to the government in doing that is that it makes it much more convenient, because then all that has to happen is that the minister, let's say, because most of it is SROs, subsidiary legislation, something that the minister has to sign to say we are implementing XYZ, as opposed to, let's say, they were going to Parliament to pass a bill which affected one of the listed rights under the Constitution, which would have been much more difficult. They put certain structures in place. So, for instance, 90 days must pass before between the laying of the bill and the initiation of the processing of the bill. It must be submitted to the Governor General, and a number of different safeguards that enshrine the rights in the Constitution. They make it extremely difficult. It would have to go to referendum for people to change. So in that context, I suppose practically for them, it makes sense to keep the state of emergency, because then it means that things can move much more quickly if the pandemic begins to get out of hand. But of course, there are very real philosophical issues that one can raise, from that. I mean, are we just going to continue to exist in a state of emergency perpetually? What happens? Because what a state of emergency really is a suspension of your rights. A minister can pass an SRO saying, once it's of course linked to a proper to the purpose of health and the gender and the public health of the persons in Grenada, can pass an SRO saying, anything that relates to that really, without the safeguards that the Constitution would normally allow. So we're speaking about freedom of movement, many different forms of freedom, expression, etc., that may be affected by a state of emergency simply by a minister signing up a piece of paper. But the practicality of keeping it so is that they have the benefit of speed, in that they don't have to go through Parliament and do a referendum in order to pass a measure which is intended to mitigate COVID.
We have a comment here from Cassandra Mitchell. She's saying Section 14 says that measures must be reasonably justifiable for dealing with the situation which exists in Grenada. Are you saying that the measures our officials are taking are reasonably justifiable to the point of affecting the right to work outlined in Chapter 1? I believe she's referencing mandatory vaccinations here.
Right, she might be referencing mandatory vaccinations. I think on that issue, there have been court decisions abroad where the courts have said that in relation to certain categories of workers, the mandatory vaccine is justified. But she might also just be asking a much more broader question. And the answer to that is really, I don't know. I don't have sufficient information to see. So I really don't have an opinion on whether or not the measures that are being taken are reasonably justifiable. They have not yet been litigated by our courts, and it really falls down to the courts to say yes or no, which would establish a firm answer. I am not in a position to see that really.
And then she's saying, why is the Bar Association so quiet about these constitutional implications of the statutes and regulations which infringe on rights and freedoms?
Well, I think the bar, not everyone in the Bar Association necessarily agrees on the same position. People differ in opinion. So I don't think that there would be that unanimity necessarily where the bar would speak with one voice around the issue.
Interesting. Okay, so we have some questions here for you, Mr. Sincere. We have a comment here that says Mr. Sincere is on point. He ought to be the chief minister of health. Is mandatory vaccination the only option? What is the politically correct statistics of death or serious illness by COVID-19? Tourists are coming from COVID-19 hotspots, so it's good to be argued that they're spreading the virus. Open up to the virus. Oh, a lot is being said here. There are no periods and comments.
May I just have one
Yes.
short thing to say that I
Quick, go ahead. Yes.
Right. No, I agree with everything that the minister would have said, Minister Cohen. Everything was perfectly put. But I also think that there's a yellow and green elephant in the room that nobody is addressing. Which might also have been a consideration of the government, and which many people feel is a consideration of the government in making the decision that it did. So that was my comment.
Minister, I will give you a chance to respond to what Richie said there. You need to adjust the cap because we can barely see you.
I think it must have slipped a bit. Let's see if I can.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. And I see you wearing your African as well. Love it.
Oh yeah, I should let you see that.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Because
that's my
why
clothes,
now? All of the information indicated we've known for a while now. So why no?
Minister, your response.
So it's cumulative, eh? Why
Yes.
now it's cumulative? If you say all of the information that I gave existed before, you don't forget that we have opened up and closed over different periods of time. It's not new. It's not now that we've done that, and we have sought the most quiet period in which to do that. Even around the carnival time when people were saying, well, you should be closing down, we were looking at it. But you have seen a pattern emerging of a few suicides. We have heard the cries. People the business sector is complaining bitterly about having to close, particularly those that are linked with the tourism sector, like the hotels and so on. If people are going to have a dinner, for example, and you say 12 o'clock, it means that by 10 o'clock, they have to shut down because people have to the patrons have to get home from wherever they come from. The workers have to clean up and do certain things. And closing at 10 o'clock is not the best business, doesn't contribute significantly to the business operation. Rather, it takes away. And the hotels are saying the same thing. And therefore, if we want that sector, and remember now we're talking about persons who are stayover passengers. So if you say cruise, and somebody did say, maybe it brings in the least amount of money. Stayover passengers do, because everything they do, they spend some money in the country. Right, and so these are the people that were being seriously affected. These are people on vacation. They want to be out late. Other people who have the other stresses of the COVID, they want to have a dinner. They want to socialize in a pretty safe environment. But when you put it 12 o'clock, it doesn't start at 12 o'clock for people. It starts 2 hours before. And because of those kinds of concerns, the government listened, the Ministry of Health listened, and we sought to seek a balance.
Okay. So I suspect so the elephant is not what Richie, I think, is Richie again.
No, I don't think so. I think what it demonstrates is that we have listened, we have sought to strike a balance, because we know the stimulus packages are very temporary, they're short-lived, and people need a continuous flow of money so that they can live. Government has also looked at giving an extra something to persons in the month of December, and monies have to be generated, and even that alone would not ease everybody's burdens and pay bills. You know what is happening with the cost of living globally. It's happening here too, and therefore we thought it was a good time. I still have my concerns. I still have my fears, you might call it, because as was said, people are not adhering to the protocols as they should. I remember when we had the spike, we saw more people on the road, on the street, more people in different places wearing the mask, and some still do. My dear epidemiologist would have been concerned seeing, maybe he said he didn't see one. I still do see some masks, but certainly not enough. So no, I think it was just an, how shall I say it, an informed decision based on all of the appeals and the concerns that were raised. We thought it might be a good time to do it. And also because people always think, when Carnival is coming, you say lockdown. When this is coming, you say that. And sometimes they get a feeling that we're creating situations. And so people were beginning to ask, nobody's dying anymore from COVID. The numbers are down, then why? And so we saw that balance.
Mr. Sincere, let me bring you in here. It appears that there is a power outage in Grenada.
Yes, Kellogg.
Is that why?
There's a blackout, yes.
Madam Minister, there is a power outage in Grenada. You need to talk to your friends at Grenlec there. I hope it does not go in St. Mark because we need you.
Yeah.
Mr. Sincere,
it hasn't gone yet, but yes.
Yes,
they've heard enough from us, and they tell us that they're working on it. But I'll give them a reminder. Cannot have Mr.
Please
Sincere not having electricity. Yeah.
Use the bully pulpit of the parliament to do so. But let me get to a question here from Mr. Grimes, Mr. Sincere. He's asking for your expert opinion on if generally mutations of viruses tend to weaken their DNA. As we see this particular mutation.
What we see happening is that the viruses generally would mutate in order for them to survive. Sometime during that process, they can become more deadly to the host, which in this case is humans. But it isn't a guarantee that it always gets worse. But the main function of the mutation is to survive. So it's like survival of the fittest. Changes occur within the DNA such that the effects of exposure, such as vaccines and other medications, become a little bit more difficult in slowing down or killing the virus. And so mutations can go anywhere, but the main function is to survive. It can become more deadly to humans or it can become less deadly. But the function is to survive. The virus wants to survive going from host to host, human to human, population to population. And so that process of a mutation, a lot of times, result in the virus becoming more deadly to the host.
And we have another question here, and I believe this is for you, Minister Tessabari is asking, would there be an opportunity for vendors in the outer parishes to be in that safe zone so they too can benefit?
Okay, I know that Shadel Nayak said Belmont Estate is one of those places. Now that we have sorted out some of the bigger places to ensure that the cruise ships could come and people could have, some measure of entertainment experience, this is a very, very important question. So, for example, the bigger ones that I know are the ones, the War Fish Friday, which I think everybody knows. The other one, which has done very well, is the St. Mark, the Victoria Food Fest, which is once monthly. And this is something that we have been talking about to get it back on track. Now, these are more open spaces, and they are more difficult to deal with. How do you maintain a bubble? As different to the market, for example, the Grand Craft Market, where it's mostly for the craft, it's mostly visitors, whether they're Grenadians who visiting and want to take back something, or whether they're persons who are complete foreigners. It is different, but we must consider it. We are working on it, and I hope that before year end we can give you some answer to that so that you can share. But I know the rural areas are hurting, so we must look at how we make, but they have to be more organized. It can't be one table in Victoria, one table in Guava or so, or better still, one table in one village and one in the other. Maybe we have to get them together in one space, and government may have to assist in creating that space for them so that the tourists can make one stop. As long as the conditions exist with the COVID, we would have to have some measure of a bubble. It may change, but we will have to have some measure of that. So I think we have to start quickly engaging those vendors out there and seeing how they can organize themselves. They don't have to form an association, but it may be better if they do because it's easier in terms of communication. But certainly, it is important. As a matter of fact, only this week, I had a meeting with the persons at Wall Street, and you know the famous Wall Street, our famous Wall Street, not the other Wall Street. And they came to speak about how they can be better organized to deal with economic matters and, of course, health matters in that area. So we continue in the process, but I think maybe we need to pick up the pace.
Now, Minister, as a follow-up to that, are there plans for unvaccinated vendors to also get their products sold?
Maybe. I would hesitate to answer that. I don't have the answer. These are things that we are discussing, but I can't say there's a clear pathway forward. You know our regulations for this country for visitors. Grenadians can come in however they are. And of course, the treatment would be a bit different. If you're fully vaccinated, you follow the protocols of the fully vaccinated. If you're unvaccinated, there is also a protocol. But visitors are all required to come fully vaccinated. What do you say to them about being served by persons who are not vaccinated? So this requires some deeper thought. I can't say I have the answer, but it's something that we have to pursue because some people have their beliefs, they may never do. But I want to urge that if persons really do not have a serious thing against vaccination, some people may feel, well, look, I'm not a frontline worker, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a policeman, I don't need to be vaccinated. If that is just your feeling, you become frontline once you provide a service to people. You exchange monies, you exchange goods, whatever, you become frontline. So that is, in my opinion, from where I sit. Government may not say, so this is my personal opinion. From the tourism point of view, you become frontline. And visitors do ask occasionally, you're asking us to come in fully vaccinated. We want to go out, we want to interface. What are you telling your people with whom we interface? We are asked this question, not every day, but we ask this question. So it's a balancing act again, and we have to keep working at it, but I don't have an answer for this.
Okay, we will take a quick break and we want to come back to wrap up the program and get some closing comments from the panel. And panel, thank you for staying with us and even working through us through a power outage in Grenada. Stand by.
So it's not a legal schooling. I know you're sensitive to people schooling you on the law, but I think I can trump you when it comes to the history of Grenada.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not fair? But you don't know the terms.
You know, we love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean.
If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm going to live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. Why then are you contesting the presidency? And viewers and listeners, welcome back to the program. We will proceed with getting some closing comments from our panel today. I know that Richie Maitland might not be able to join us for that closing segment, but we certainly thank him for giving a legal perspective on today's program in the context of the ever-emerging COVID-19 situation, epidemiological situation, and its impact on tourism and business and commerce in Grenada and in the Caribbean. And so, Mr. Sincere, I want to start with you. Of course, as you said before, the cautionary tale remains. You are urging personal responsibility. You're saying that you're seeing some of the lapses in judgment that we saw in August and September of this year, we seem to be seeing that again. So I want to give you an opportunity to put into context what we should be doing in this period of revelry.
Yes, and Kelon, and to all our listeners, this is not a time for us to think that it's all gone and it's behind us. We must continue to strengthen the fight against COVID-19, this deadly virus, and we understand the impact it had on us. It has been proven that the protocols established are very effective, and so our first line of defense would be adhering to the protocols of social distancing of 6 feet, wearing our mask properly, especially when we are in closed environments, among crowds, etc., and sanitizing our hands and surfaces that are regularly touched by other individuals. If we were to employ these strategies as individuals and as a population, we would have done a great part of the fight against the COVID-19 spread and the transmission. Further, we have the opportunities to take the vaccines that are available to us as a population. We do understand that not everyone is going to accept and take the vaccines, but this is another level of protection. In addition to that, individuals need to continue to live healthy lifestyles to ensure that their bodies are functioning at optimal levels by constantly using foods that would boost your immune system, by regularly exercising. These are strategies that we can use as individuals and as population. Managing your stress and anxieties are also another important aspect that individuals and as a population we need to continue to employ within our daily lives. As I said, the second wave or outbreak potentially would be in areas that have the lowest levels of vaccine uptake. And so, as a country, we need to be mindful of that. Even though we have the relaxed opportunities now where we can be outside 24/7 without any curfew or restrictions, and we ought to remember that the pandemic is just in another phase, and Grenada have had only one wave, and so potentially we have second waves that may attack our nation, especially during the festive seasons, and we are approaching Christmas, which is a time when we have a lot of fun, we enjoy, we eat, we socialize, we visit, etc. And so as a result, each Grenadian needs to accept that and to take his or her responsibility seriously every time in the fight against COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Sincere. Mr. Pear?
That's all. In closing, I would like to say, I guess we lost Richie because of the outage. Unfortunately, I'm an office.
He's back. He's back now.
He's back. Oh, because
yes.
I mean, Richie asked why know about the reopening, but I don't think it could have come in a better time because the mental wellness of people was on the verge of actually losing it. So would have wanted more people vaccinated and stuff? We would have loved that. But I think it came just in the right time when people just about had it. But again, man have to be responsible. One have to be responsible for their actions. So therefore, we have to be mindful of the protocols, etc. So I just want to encourage people to, have a safe and enjoyable holidays and, be safe out there. Because COVID is real.
COVID is real. It's not a hoax. It's not a hoax. Richie?
Yeah.
Some final closing comments from you. We were closing the program before Grenlek rudely interrupted us.
Yes. It seems like we back to load shedding.
Yeah, but let's get some closing comments from you today as we close the program.
All right. So what I would say, it's a ticklish situation. Obviously, the medical evidence is in development, but there are certain things that we know for a fact. We know for a fact that COVID is real, that it kills people, and that even if it doesn't kill a person, that it can leave them with long COVID, which affects many different bodily systems very severely and for very long. I would encourage people to stick to the protocols as well. So wash your hands, get vaccinated. I myself have been vaccinated. I didn't have any severe consequences of it, and I'm happy I'm protected. I'm also happy that I can protect my loved ones, which is also very important to me. My parents are getting older, etc., etc. They are vaccinated too, but still, I have loved ones who are older. And wear a mask, and keep your distance, right? Because
And not wear it under your nose. That's not full protection.
No. Because we are a small island nation. We have to realize our vulnerabilities to external shocks. I mean, we're already seeing shocks to the supply chain. We really want this thing to end, and if it is that we want it to end, we have to be serious about taking the measures that it will take to end it. So let us all collectively as Grenadians do what we have to do. And I would also encourage the government to do more PSAs, to put out more public information, because the amount of ignorance out there is astounding.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that, Richie. And let me bring back the minister here, Minister and MP for St. Mark. But
Yeah.
Minister, before I give you an opportunity for closing comments, there is a lot happening in the political landscape of Grenada. A lot of changes are occurring. Your colleague, Minister, in your neighboring constituency of St. Patrick West indicated that your party is having a transition committee in place in preparation for the departure of the political leader of the NNP from the political scene. Now, would you be throwing your hat into the ring for leadership of your party, Minister Modestin? And what are your thoughts on the current political happenings in the country? How has that affected the modus operandi of your party?
Okay, so the answer to the first question, would I be throwing in my hat? So that one is a very short answer. It's interesting. What is happening is interesting. It's good. There's nothing wrong with change. There's nothing wrong with persons coming up in different parties, whether it's our party or other parties, and putting themselves up for position, whether it's just to be an MP or whether it's to be a leader. And because I have always lamented the people who speak the most, if you ask them to take the hot seat and to be a
I think that
to
the
run for
ministers
election, they wouldn't, because it's not an easy decision. It's an interesting time, and my party is doing things, and it hasn't started with the installation or the declaration or whatever that we have, that the other party has a new leader. It has started before. There's been a lot of conversation. That's why I can answer you categorically for my first thing. I think our party is well placed to contend the next election very effectively. We have a mix. I hear talk about youth. We do have youths. And I think people have forgotten that. They look at the prime minister and maybe they look at other members of us and say, well, they're all old. We're not all old. We do have young people. And we do have young people who are supportive of the party. So I think it's a good time. It's a good time for democracy. And that is what we're seeing playing out there. So I look forward to seeing what happens on the political scene in the next few months.
Absolutely, and you let me know when you will be having dinner with the leader of the opposition.
I do. I owe him that. We have a great friendship, and he does give me my my quota of wine every year. I hope that will continue. But yes, I have to take him because a few days ago, one of the young men who came to me from Wall Street, and sometimes with this card Wall Street as just a few people who have nothing to do come in and sell some drinks and food. And when that young man told me his history, where he started on hotels. He was upgraded to how do you call them again, the head chef in that place, and what he did with his life and opportunities he got in Grenada, in hotels in Grenada, as well as outside of Grenada. If anyone thinks that it's just low-level jobs our people are getting, they are very wrong. If anyone says that we could get more senior positions, I would certainly agree. In spite of the fact that many have attained senior School of Hospitality Arts that has linked up with Cornell University and other linkages now to strengthen a school of education for people in the tourism sector. I believe that that is just around the corner once this happens. The speakers before me were very eloquent with what they said. I really cannot add more, except to say that visitors do have choices where they go. And if we do not create the environment for them, they will just go somewhere else. That is the reality. They don't have to come. We don't have a contract with them. They don't have to come. So there are certain times when you have to compromise. And I believe we are at that stage now, and that is where we have to work. Other than that, I would say, look, let's try and get vaccinated. People may have their feelings about it. I respect their rights. But the reality is, the science has proven that the vaccine is extremely, extremely effective in doing all of the things that was said before. I wouldn't go into it. And so we need that for our country to survive. We need that for our people, our family, our relatives. I went to visit two of my sisters this morning early, and I felt more confident because I was vaccinated, and I felt more confident I wasn't bringing anything to them. But another thing I want to add is an occasional testing. I think the country and the admin of businesses should look at, because of the fact that you can be vaccinated and still have the disease, we should look at a frequency to have persons tested to ensure that in the workplace they do not transmit the disease, and certainly they do not take it home. So this is my contribution. I'm thankful. It has been very important for learning. I want to hail out the gentleman from Mongazo. We've had a lot of conversations, and he knows that our ministry and GTA, we give support to individuals, not just mandate, get vaccinated or not, but we work with people to do things to make the product even better so that we can be competitive in this country. So tourism has a lot on the horizon, and I look forward to another year, another budget year in tourism.
All right, Dr. Modeste, thank you for appearing on the Bubb Report. As usual, you've been always accommodating to us and ensuring that you're giving that information to the public. So we thank you for that, as always. A panel, of course, I wish to wish all of you a happy holiday season.
Yeah.
And please send up some consignments of sorrel for me. But this will be the last year that I will be missing the holiday season. I'll be down in Grenada next year for Christmas. So panel, thank you again for appearing on the program. And to our viewers and listeners, thank you for your spirited contributions, your questions and comments. It was very valuable. On behalf of my production team, I wish to thank you. I'm your host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. Have a great and safe week ahead. Bye-bye.